Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brad Kuvan. I'm the editorial director of Metal Forming magazine at the Precision Metal Forming Association. And it's my distinct pleasure to welcome you and thank you for joining us today for our roundtable discussion on COVID-19 and its impact on the metal forming and fabricating industry. Today's live event is jointly presented by Metal Forming magazine and PMA. And while I know there are several resources out there that are offering up-to-the-minute information on the pandemic and how manufacturers are dealing with it, we feel like we've prepared for you today a unique event where you'll hear from several industry experts on the topic, each with their own perspective. Just a couple of notes before we get started. First, all the attendees of today's event, some 200 of you so far, are in listen-only mode. That means our presenters cannot hear you, but we do want you to ask questions as they come up during the event. So as you're listening to a presenter and you think of questions, please simply type them into that question panel, that Q&A panel in the corner of your screen. And then at the end of the presentations, we'll address as many of those questions as we can. Also, I want to let you know that an archived recording of today's live meeting will appear on our Metal Forming magazine website either later this afternoon or first thing tomorrow morning. And once that gets posted to the website, we'll send everybody an email that has the link so that you can view the webinar again or share it with colleagues. So let's get started. Our panel today, we're pleased to welcome moderator Lori Harbour from Harbour Results. Also Omar Nashashidi from the Franklin Partnership, which is PMA's lobbying partner in Washington, D.C. We're also pleased to have two metal forming company executives join us today. Both of them are located in states that are right in the thick of this issue. Gretchen Zierick from Zierick Manufacturing in New York, and Hale Foote from Scandic Springs in Northern California. So again, Gretchen and Hale have agreed to share some of the strategies that they're adopting at their companies in order to overcome some of the challenges that they're facing. And then we're also privileged to have with us principals from two of the leading consulting firms that are immersed in our metal forming industry, Jeff George from Baker Tilly and Alex Neckeritz from Plant Moran. So we'll get things started with a couple of prepared PowerPoint presentations, one from Lori and then one from Omar. Then we'll hear from Gretchen and Hale and then turn things over to Jeff and Alex for their perspectives. So Lori, the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Brad. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this webinar. I hope that you're all staying healthy and safe, and as well as your families and your employees. It's not fun that we have to do it this way, but I'm sure everyone's getting used to virtual presentations, so we'll do the best we can here. I'm going to just sort of briefly kick off the event with a few thoughts from our side on kind of managing through this crisis, and then I will moderate the rest of this great group through our session and lead some Q&A and certainly, as Brad said, take a lot of your questions as we go through this. Obviously, we're at some very unprecedented times in today's environment. There's absolutely no playbook for what we're going through. If you're in automotive, all the OEMs have shut down and likely won't restart any of those facilities until the May 4th week. Many of the tier ones have followed. Other industries are also down, or at least in some skeleton fashion, with the exception of probably medical and food and beverage and a couple other select essential industries. Of course, the economy has kind of largely come to a halt overnight, both in North America as well as globally. And this is just a very dramatic shutdown. It's not like 2008 and 2009, where we sort of slowly went through an economic impact. It's probably more like 9/11, but even has a much greater impact. So we'll just share a couple thoughts with you, Brad. If you can go to our next slide. We've been working with companies, doing virtual meetings with them and trying to really get their head wrapped around sort of the short-term, mid-term, and long-term. We define it probably a little differently than most, short-term being sort of immediate 2 weeks, mid-term being more of that two to 6 weeks when we see production ramping back up again, and then long-term, what needs to be in place. And so some of these probably seem very obvious to some of you, and yet shockingly, I've talked to several hundred companies in the last couple of weeks, and many people are still in the maybe shock or reactive mode and are not thinking through every element of what they can. And so some are very obvious where others are maybe different. Before I even go into some of the short term, obviously the communication piece is first and foremost. This is a very personal and kind of emotional situation for people. And so being able to address people directly and manage your teams effectively and communicate day in and day out through meetings is important. They want to know and they want to hear what's happening. Or kind of we're all in it together mode. So as we move to short term, obviously managing cash is critical, line item by line item, income statement, and understanding where you can manage cash. Implementing the obvious COVID procedures, which I won't go through. You guys all know those guidelines and guidances better than I do. And then evaluating and considering whether you either have to close or whether you've slowed down. And I know some have already closed, but some are considering closing going forward in order to conserve cash for a couple of weeks until they can get to an SBA loan. If we move to the midterm, it's also about meeting with your banks and meeting with them right now. You know, the SBA and federal funding available is one aspect of financial support, but your current bank covenants and banking relationship is a different animal, and how you manage it and what you ask for and how you can get leniency there is different. And some banks have already started to clamp down on their leniency there because they are concerned about some companies' health. Developing scenario plans, what's the best case, the worst case, and the likely case that your company will go through, putting 13-week cash flows together, calling your customers, understanding when you think they're going to pay so you can build that 13-week cash flow and develop that, you know, likely scenario and then the high and the low so that you can manage things. This is very critical in today's future. A lot of companies don't have 13-week cash flows, and it's an absolute must right now. Being creative with your labor management, how you're working shifts, how you're managing them together. This is probably the most important as it relates to the social side. And then developing that plan for when you have that first case in your plant or a family member of a plant worker, that type of thing. As we move to long term, the 6 weeks and above, this is really about how do I ramp back up? How do I, what guidance do I need in terms of social distancing to bring people back? How do I ramp my supply base up? How do I bring my people back and make them feel comfortable? And how do I meet production going forward? Continuing to purposely plan, you know, daily calls, multiple daily calls, and then planning that continued cash flow and availability. Frankly, cash flow and availability should be your daily exercise anyways, whether you're a healthy business or not, but now it's more critical than ever before. Let me go to this next chart where I share with you some of why I'm slightly concerned about our PMA membership and manufacturing in general in kind of the small and medium-sized space. Let me unpack this chart a little bit. What you're looking at on the x-axis is a debt-to-earnings ratio, and this is total debt. So it includes lines of credit and against your EBITDA and your total debt against your EBITDA. And then on the y-axis, you have your actual EBITDA. So the way you read this is that if a company has a debt to earnings ratio of 2, that cluster of shops that have that number 2 debt to earnings ratio has an average of about 10% EBITDA and an upper quartile of 13% and above and a lower of 9% and below. And there's about 100 shops in this data set that you're looking at. And unfortunately, it's about a 50-50 split, 50% of them in the red and 50% of them in the green. And so if companies were in a very tough spot going into the COVID crisis or coming into 2020 overall, the federal loans are going to help bridge the gap. But when they return to full volume and come back on the backside, when you consider stretch payments and other interesting customer behavior, we're going to need the support from our banks. And if we have a high debt to earnings ratio going into this, it's going to be even more challenging. And so this is the tough spot I think many manufacturers are in, and it's why it's so critical to be looking at some of these future steps that the folks on the webinar are going to share with you today. So on the next slide and the last slide, if you look at just kind of what the future holds for manufacturing in general from our perspective, we unfortunately think there's going to be a fallout of some unhealthy companies. probably more in the back half of the year. If you think about automotive specifically, which is the 800-pound gorilla in the room, forecasters are saying that we're going to have a run rate in the back half of a year of about 9 to 10 million units. And then you combine that with the first quarter of this year, that's how we get to about 13 to 14 million units on what was a 17 million unit year last year. So even though we'll have these SBA loans that will keep our people working and allow us to keep them employed, we're going to look at reduced full production in the back half of the year. So we can get back to full production, but it's what's going to be called a new full production. Additionally, service and retail will still be down, so car sales will be very slow, and that's going to impact the industry. So we have a whole new normal that will affect us. Working from home, young millennials and Gen Zs who believe that working from home is something we should be doing anyways, and maybe we've resisted it, and now we've been doing it for several weeks, may come back and say, hey, there's a new norm out here, boss. How do we work together in the future? Thirdly, the supply chain will be, as you've read and heard throughout the industry, will be the number one concern of all. The OEMs obviously can't just turn on an automotive assembly plant or an appliance plant or a John Deere plant, for example. We need the supply chain, and there's thousands of people that are at the first tier level and even more at the tier 2 level. So this will be the most critical. And then fourthly, in my opinion, I think technology and automation will be our future. It will be the next 3 to 5 years of people looking at how do we actually reduce labor. We have tool shops today that are still running with a skeleton crew because they have lights out machining, and they're still meeting a lot of their production volumes at a lesser pace, but certainly are continuing to run. So I think that will be more critical. I think that communication is the key to everything that we do, and I think price pressure is going to be huge. And these large OEs that are ultimately our customers will be strained going into the third and the fourth quarter of this year, and that will create huge challenges. So that's just sort of my opening remarks. We have on the next slide, which you'll get in your packet when Brad emails this out to you, we have a 3-month membership to our for free to our Harbor IQ, which is an ongoing weekly market intelligence tool where we're studying this and looking at vehicle launches and other industry launches. No credit card needed. You can just opt in on that. So at that, I'll leave you with that. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Omar, who's going to share a tremendous amount of very valuable information with you as well.
Thanks so much, Lori. This is Omar Nashashibi with the Franklin Partnership. I'm one of the founding partners here. We've been lobbying for manufacturing trade association since about 2002 when we first began working for the Precision Metal Forming Association in Washington, D.C. on the 201 steel tariffs. In addition, we represent a total of 5 different manufacturing associations with about 3,000 businesses. And so between all of them, we're hitting quite an earful over the last 2 weeks in terms of confusion certainly caused at the state level by what's called an essential business, and then all the way now until the latest of what we're trying to deal with and understanding what the new PPP starts with. So I thought I'd get started here on this next slide by giving a quick overview of who determines what an essential business is. And this is where we've gotten quite a bit of confusion. One of our panelists, or 2 of them, both Hale and Gretchen, you'll hear from later, have a lot of great firsthand experience here. I just want to give people an idea of why this is happening the way it is. So the determination of an essential business, meaning that entity permitted to remain open during a stay-at-home closure, is defined at the local state level. It is not being done at the federal level with one uniform standard, which is what's created a lot of the confusion. You can literally have cities and counties just across the borders from one another or in another state have drastically different rules, even if they're part of the same local economy and substructure there. And that's why you've seen the patchwork that's come out. You've got about 30 or so states now, just as of this morning, just about 30, have established and adopted at least partial versions of the federal government's voluntary definition. But again, the way our governments and our laws are structured is that it provides and delegates that authority to the local levels to police, to manage emergency powers, health and safety. And so that's why until now, setting aside the political reasons, that you haven't seen the federal government just come out and do a nationwide shutdown, for which many have called for. As of right now, I believe that we have all but 8 states, I want to say, have some kind of a stay-at-home order. And what they normally do is they will either themselves come up with their own definition of what is an essential business, or they will use the federal guidelines. And here on this next slide, you'll see the overview of the federal guideline and what they've done. After PMA and other groups lobbied the White House and then ultimately FEMA about 2 Wednesdays ago, 2 weeks from tomorrow, 2 weeks backwards from tomorrow, what they finally came back and said, yes, the patchwork that's been going on, the confusion, especially in places like Pennsylvania, about what is an essential business, the federal government somewhat stepped in. On March 19th, on that Thursday evening, they did release a voluntary guideline. So this definition is not binding upon the state or county or local jurisdictions that have stay-at-home orders. What a lot of governors have been doing in their executive orders, and I know at least PMA and other groups, we've been sending out to our members state by state as a new order is created. For example, Tennessee, Missouri, and Texas just put in their stay-at-home orders here in the last 3 or 4 days now. We are hoping most of them adopt this language that we help lobby on. This is, as you note, the March 28th version 2.0. It's being developed by the Homeland Security folks over at CISA is how you pronounce it, CISA.gov. That's where you'd go to find if there's any changes. Our understanding from FEMA staff is this is a live document, and they may provide this guidance to states with some updates over time. So CISA.gov, what they did at Homeland Security is developed a list of 16 different categories or what are considered critical. And here's the definition of critical: manufacturing and transportation. There was much confusion going into last week about whether or not automotive suppliers fit the definition of critical, but we believe, and others in Washington believe, that's been clarified and addressed between these 2 points here. So that's where we are with regards to essential critical definitions. Unfortunately, you can't just go to one source and see what it is. You do have to go through the different states and also at the federal level. And just quickly, a couple of slides on where we are and where we're going from the Washington, D.C. side. The phase 1 bill that dealt with mostly vaccine and test kits and also created the small business disaster loan program. The phase 2, much of you have had to deal with pretty quickly, effective April 1st, with the expansion of the paid sick leave and FMLA expansion under emergency conditions, and then the tax credits. Right now, what you're all dealing with the new Paycheck Protection Program loan, that is what started on this last Friday, came in the phase 3. And we're now looking at a phase 4, which we're hearing Marco Rubio believes the loan program needs between $200 and $250 billion. That might happen as early as this Thursday. We'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. But we think there's going to be at least one more round of stabilization funding before hopefully the economy is ready for some recovery spending. Just quickly on this next slide, we'll just give it an overview of what Congress did and Washington did in the phase 3, the economic stabilization stimulus measure. Yes, larger companies did have a loan program of about $454 billion for the non-airlines and non-hospitality that they can tap into, of course, for hospitals and others. I know there's been some question about the emergency unemployment insurance benefits that is $600 on top of those funds that are already being provided by the states. Keep in mind that person would have to be separated from their job or have a qualifying reason, one of only 2, to quit for them to be eligible for that. Before I jump into the loan program, on the bottom half of this slide, though, shows you those other tax provisions and other items that we were able to have included that are not related to the loan, including a holiday for your Social Security payroll taxes now not having to be due until the end of 2021 with a balance a year later. Same thing, your net operating loss. We think that was a real important change, getting us a 5-year carryback, although obviously that doesn't help you with cash right now. On this next slide, as we talk about cash right now, what the government's trying to do for you is keep as much cash in the bank in the businesses as possible and prevent mass layoffs. We just got an email from a Hill staffer. They're hearing the real unemployment is actually at least 13% as of today. And so obviously that number is going to grow exponentially when we get our Thursday morning UI reports that come out there. A quick overview of what's in the stimulus loan bill. Under 500 employees or fewer, loan applications are being accepted from last Friday through June 30th. The loan will mature after 2 years at a 1% fixed rate, and you're permitted to defer payments for 6 months. This is effectively a formula. What they're trying to do is get you into June. It's 2.5 months. Effectively, you want to take your average payroll, your mortgage, your rent payments, and that you multiply that by 2.5%. 2.5 times rather, and that's going to be your maximum loan amount. So if you've got a payroll, let's say of about 1.2 million, you divide that by 12, your average monthly payroll is 100,000, multiply that by 2.5, and you're going to get your maximum loan amount of 2.5%. You can use it for payroll support. That's really where they want it to go. You cannot use it for emergency paid sick leave because you can only already claim a credit. But again, we fought really hard to eliminate the personal guarantee in the collateral requirement. So we urge you, go speak with your SBA lender now, and this is the time as soon as possible before this money runs out. I mean, lastly, as we look at next steps here, we've got news changing by the minute. As I just mentioned, we're hearing rumors that McConnell and the White House are discussing another package. Rubio's talking we need another $250 billion to go into the PPP program in order to keep the loan up and running. We'll see if that happens. They're thinking the Senate might be able to move something on Thursday. The speaker is going to have something to say about that. So we'll get a better sense of where they go next steps. But Congress does see the urgency, even though they're not all here in Washington. It is all hands on virtual deck, so to speak, and they're very, very active. Any thoughts folks have that what we can do in the next rounds and next packages? Please contact your associations, your representatives, because things are going to move very, very quickly here on Capitol Hill because we know we need to keep cash in the businesses. Thanks, Brad.
Thank you, Omar. At this point, we're going to turn it over to Gretchen and have her present a little bit from a stamper's perspective. Gretchen?
Hi, everybody. So my first reaction, and this was literally coming back from the PMA annual meeting and landing at an almost empty airport and discovering that even the grocery stores had nothing on the shelves. So I came into work the next work day and said, oh, we have to do something here. We need to keep going business as usual to keep everybody calm because it was mass hysteria in New York State. So that was our first priority, was to keep everybody working, but to also keep them safe. We immediately instituted extra cleaning. We got extra supplies. Luckily, we could still get toilet paper from our supplier, limiting visitors, and issuing every employee an ID card that says Zierick Manufacturing, an essential New York business, so that if they got stopped, they had something to show. We were hearing rumors at that point that the National Guard had been called out and that they were going to be shutting down the roads. So it was a very hectic time at the beginning because nobody quite knew what was going to happen next. Our employees, we met with the employees in small groups, trying to keep that social distancing, and we have continued that practice. So we are still open, business as usual. We've declared ourselves essential based on both the federal definition and the New York State definition, which is almost identical to the federal, which has been a good thing. So yes, we are essential. We started evaluating our supply chain. Were we going to have trouble getting raw material? In some ways, we were lucky because we've had a huge, huge backlog of work and a very long lead time that we've been trying to shorten. So we've been ordering our material out a couple months so that if we have space in our schedule, we can run something and get it out the door. So we actually have a lot of material. If our vendors do decide they're going to take a short shutdown, we'll still be okay. But so far, they're all still working. They're all essential as well. So we haven't seen any interruptions there. We have gotten a lot of calls from customers. Are you open? What's happening in New York? Are you guys going to be able to ship? I'm going to need parts. Some customers have actually increased their orders. Some have moved things in. A few have moved things out and said, we're shutting down for 2 weeks, or we're shutting down for a month. It depends on where they're located and what the situation is in their state or country, because Zierick ships all over the world. So we've been reassuring our customers. We posted a letter on our website almost immediately, and we've updated that so that our customers can look at the very first page of our website and see what I've said, that we're open, we're still working, we're going to get you your parts. And by the way, we're bringing in our lead times, which is encouraging to a lot of our customers. Cash flow, as Lori said, that's a critical concern. I have to say Zierick is lucky in that we have no debt, but still we do need money to pay the bills and pay the payroll. So we're looking very closely at our cash flow. We're evaluating those customers who have already said they're going to push out their payments and those customers who, in a tight spot, always do push out their payments. And we know who they are, the bad actors. but we're also looking at whether or not we continue to accept credit card payments, knowing that if a company has paid us on a credit card and then can't pay their credit card bill, that the credit card company may pull that payment back out of the next payment that the credit card company owes to us. So we're actually looking at asking more customers to do wire transfers and send checks. Some customers will probably be put on what I call one at a time, where we ship them an order and we need to know we got paid for it before we ship the next order. That will, I think, reduce our risk of shipping things out that we can't get paid for. Always a big concern. Then we started thinking about our local community and realized as we drove around, as all of us came to work, that more and more things were shut and everything was empty. This all started 3 or 4 days before the governor ordered everything to close. So we had a week of working where things were basically open, and then we came back on a Monday to everything being shut. So only a few places are still open, and over the weeks, we're now in week 3 in New York, we have seen more places that were open close. And I mean little local grocery stores, little local restaurants, the places that were open with seats that were changed over to takeout only, many of them have shut. But we decided that since we support so many of them on a regular basis, that we would step that up. And to make sure of that, the company has been buying lunch every week for all of our employees. So every employee gets lunch at least one day a week from the company. And we split everybody up so we didn't overload any one little deli or little tiny restaurant. And the response has been superb so far. The restaurants are thrilled to have our business each week, and the employees are enjoying it. So it's boosted morale internally and externally. We're also now keeping track of what local places are open and still trying to do business. So we've got little notices posted that the Dunkin' Donuts that's closest to us doesn't open until 7 o'clock in the morning, but the one outside of town is open earlier if you want to stop and pick up breakfast on your way in. And by the way, if you need your oil changed, well, the gas station up the street is open and they aren't as busy as usual. You can get your car in right away. So we're also just trying to share information and keep those local businesses supported. We want them to be there when this is over. And then we got to, okay, government help. So the first thing we heard about was the Families First Act, and looking at that, realized what a drain that was going to be on cash. If we had to pay people who were suddenly at home because their children's schools were closed, and all the schools in New York closed right away. So that happened very quickly. And we've been fortunate. Most of our employees have a spouse who could stay home and work from home. So our employees have been able to continue to come to work. But we were very, very frightened by that. So far, no one has applied for a leave under that act. But I know it still could happen if somebody does test positive or have a family member test positive. So it's out there. But then the Paycheck Protection Program came up. Free money? This sounds too good to be true, but we're applying for it just as almost every other company is. I know that we've found that our local bank was so overwhelmed with applications that when we tried to get our application in yesterday, the site said, try again tomorrow. And I honestly don't know when we're going to be able to get our application in, but we are trying because it will make a difference. There's no doubt. I think those are some of the challenges we've been through in New York, and we may actually be starting to see light at the end of the tunnel in the next week or so. I hope things get better soon. Good luck to everybody. Thanks.
Thank you, Gretchen. At this point, we will turn it over to Hale, who also has a few remarks to share and some steps that he's gone through at his stamping operation. Hale?
Yeah, thanks. The West Coast was kind of early on with this, starting in Seattle and then very quickly here in the Bay Area. So we, about a month ago, started doing things like stockpiling supplies and trying to really get ahead of this. And of course, it's still a moving target. But I did develop 5 concrete things that we have done. And again, this is still evolving, but these 5 things so far have served us really well. The first you'll see on the screen is go ahead and make sure you post the required notices, the safety notices. There's a couple of those out now that you need to have very prominently displayed, front door, all around the plant. And then part of that, of course, is actually model good behavior and follow those rules. Don't let your employees see you slacking off. And we've been very diligent about that, and I think it really carries through. Secondly is use your ERP system, run a list of current orders, and mark those which really are unquestionably essential. In our case, it's medical devices, electrical gear, internet stuff. And don't be here. I mean, we have some customers who are not essential types things, and I wouldn't say that to them because they would be offended. But you know who your critical jobs are, so make sure you identify those and that. Number 3 is print out a list of those jobs and then connect each of those with one or more employees' names. So that if you're questioned, why is she here and working, you can say she is working on this medical device, which is shipping to Pittsburgh next week. And that's really the excuse for that employee to be at your plant. And number 4, post letters from your brand name, well-known customers in your lobby. I'm looking right now out my window at the business across the street. They have their letters laminated like we do. They're hanging by a string on the front door, so the very first thing any visitor sees is those letters. We did that, and so in some cases we solicited letters from our customers. In other cases, our customers already sent them to us saying, "You're making parts for the electrical system at these well-known hospitals like the Cleveland Clinic or Walter Reed. We need you to keep making these parts so those institutions stay in business." I did that, and about 2 hours later, I saw a police car drive up. He came in. He asked the person in charge, that's me. And so I could walk out to the front lobby and talk with the police officer. He said, "Why are you in business? We are questioning cars in the parking lot." And I pointed to those letters, and he said, oh, okay, that makes sense. And so far, so good. He will probably be back, but I feel very confident that we're in good stead there. And then number 5, like Gretchen did, we wrote up a letter of transit on company letterhead for each employee to take in their car so that if and when they're stopped and questioned, "Why are you on the road?" they can say, "I'm going to work. Here's where I work. Here's what we're working for. These are the critical infrastructure parts." And again, so far that's been good. It gives the employee a good sense of security about being out in the public for a valid reason, and we've not had anybody so far turned away. So this is still evolving. This is where we are so far, but I think we're on the right track.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thanks, Hale. We're going to do a couple questions here for Hale and Gretchen before we move on to some remarks from Jeff and Alex. Hale, I want to start with you first and just maybe ask you, what are you doing in your organization? Gretchen talked a little bit about this for her company, but what are you doing to keep up employee morale as, you know, a lot of these employees' families and friends are pressuring them to kind of stay home maybe, and you know, they're worried about paying bills and things of that nature. What have you done from a morale perspective in your organization?
Yeah, I mean, people are worried about money, obviously. They're worried about getting sick, and they're worried about money. So on the getting sick part, we have been really diligent about our hygiene and sanitation. We put, you know, marks on the floor, like a lot of stores now have 6-foot-long marks. We used our water jet to cut some custom hooks, things people can carry around to open doors. It gave everybody one of those. On the money part, I made a mental decision a month ago that people were going to get paid, and I told them that. This is even before the protection plan, the paycheck plan came out. I said to people, "I don't know what's going to happen for the next couple of months, but don't worry about money." And that went a long ways. And now, of course, there is some relief to that, and I won't be paying the entire bill myself, but I think that went a long ways to people feel more secure. I said, if you feel sick, stay home. Your job is safe. Your paycheck is good. We'll figure it out. So far, so good.
Great. Gretchen, for you, how are you dealing with some of the concerns that your customers may not survive the crisis? And, you've got parts you've shipped to them or you're making or you have materials. How are you addressing that internal to your business?
It may be a little harder for us than for some companies because we have a catalog and we have thousands of customers. Having said that, many of them are small and those orders are little, so the actual concern for each one is also small. On the bigger customers, we've got our salespeople talking to them, seeing if their forecasts are holding up. Do they plan on closing? For how long? What are they doing with their orders? Are they pushing things out or not? So that we can do a better job of planning. Tomorrow we'll have a meeting with sales and accounting to go through the bad actor list, those customers that typically stretch out their payments too far, that we think may do that again, and we'll decide what we're going to do with each of them individually, and then sales will talk to them individually.
Okay, very good. Hale, one more for you. If these stay-at-home orders continue for another 30 days or longer, how do you plan for what would be sort of nearly a 2-month disruption? I mean, even though you're running, there's some, I'm assuming, change in forecast. And so are you able to kind of look into the future, or are you focused primarily about today?
No, Laurie, I kind of like your midterm and long-term slide. When I made that mental decision a month or so ago to keep going, I was really thinking about long-term business continuity. Even though it will hurt in the short term, cash flow-wise, if we're going to survive as a business, we have to have the employees, and we have to take care of customers located around the country who, if I say we're closing, those customers will say, I'm going to find another supplier. That work will probably never come back. So I'm really looking to the mid to long term by saying I'm going to spend what it takes to keep going. Gretchen's business has been around for 101 years. It's been around for 51 years. I'd like to think we can both keep that going.
Right. Gretchen, one more for you, and then we'll do some more later. We've got quite a few coming in online as well. But, arguably, you have a little bit more hindsight, maybe by weeks or days, than some of the other folks in other regions of the country. So what is sort of the first piece of advice that you would give to a metal fabricator that's just kind of starting to feel the impact in their business and community? There's many people in sort of middle America who've got, small numbers of cases versus what you're seeing in New York. Do you have any insight for them out of the gate?
Well, as Hale said, our employees are key to all of us. So pay attention to your employees and their worries, because you need them to keep going. Beyond that, think about your community and what you can do to help your community. Okay.
One quick one that I think is interesting from the group that came in live. Are either of your people, are they wearing PPE equipment? Is it mandatory? What are they doing while they're running? Gretchen, why don't you start?
Interestingly, since the CDC just said that masks may help, we walked around today and talked to small groups of employees and told them, the CDC now says masks may help. If you want to wear masks, it's fine. Just be very careful not to have any long strings hanging out when you're near any piece of equipment. We certainly don't need anybody getting hurt. We have one employee who is in the military who is showing people how to take a big handkerchief and 2 rubber bands and make a homemade mask. We told people you can wear them if you want. Just wash them every night, because you really don't want to be carrying around and breathing your own germs every day. Mm-hmm. But other than that, we really aren't requiring anything. We just tell people wash your hands all the time.
Yes, similar here in California. We again, luckily we were ahead enough, so we have lots of supplies. And people are wearing gloves. Most doors are propped open, so no one's touching door handles. There's plenty of masks. And we also have about 1,000 square feet per employee here, so people are really spread out. And so far, it's worked out okay.
Great. Also, Gretchen, can you share your current policies that you have in place when you get your first positive case on the production floor? Initially, we thought we would have to close for 2 weeks if we had a positive case.
But now the intelligence seems to be telling us we don't need to do that. We need to advise the employees that someone tested positive. Again, we have to protect the employee's identity, so we can't say who. We would probably close for a couple of days to do a super deep cleaning. That's my feeling right now, and then come back to work. People may, at that point, choose to stay home because they're more afraid, and I can't help that.
Yeah.
The CDC is currently saying 24 hours, isolate the affected area, then soap and water, and then disinfect it, and then keep going.
Okay. Last quick one, and then we'll move on to Jeff. Hazard pay. Lots of questions about hazard pay. Are you doing hazard pay, Gretchen?
No.
Hale, any hazard pay on your side?
No, not at all here. No one's even raised it.
Okay, good. Well, we'll move past that one quickly then. At this point, we will definitely do more questions for Hale and Gretchen towards the end, but at this point, I want to move on to a couple of our other experts here. I want to introduce Jeff George from Baker Tilly. And Jeff, you recently were on a call with the National Association of Manufacturers and Vice President Pence. And so we'd love it if you could share some of the information from that survey that you shared with the Vice President.
Oh, thank you very much, Lori. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes,
Lori,
we can
hear
hear you.
me? All right, very good. Thank you. Yeah, before we move on to the next slide, just by way of context, I think it helps to provide just a few seconds as to the prism that we're bringing, not only from our dialogue with members of the White House and other associations, but the perspective that we're bringing really comes from helping thousands of manufacturers in the U.S., many of them abroad. These range from closely held, often under 10 million a year in revenue, all the way to some of the most recognizable industrial and consumer brands at home and globally. And because supply chain are global, right, we have a footprint across 147 countries, we tend to see things from a pretty diverse perspective. And what we want to share here with you in this next slide is really the statistics that are coming out of a pretty broad swath of manufacturers across the U.S. And we share them here really by way of aiming to establish common ground. That yes, at an individual level, we're all affected by COVID-19. At a business level, we are too. But really, as a sector, manufacturers are really facing a very common denominator in terms of the challenge, right? If you look at the numbers, again, this is in the live call with Vice President Pence and a few hundred manufacturers that responded to this flash survey. I think one of the numbers to hone in on is one, we spent a lot of time as Lori and our team shared on the financial impact of the crisis. About 80% of the respondents are feeling this is going to have an impact. But from our perspective, looking at supply chain, 35% of the respondents were already facing significant supply chain disruptions. By significant, meaning we're either suspending the way in which we purvey products and or we have substantially changed our ability to serve our markets, which invariably will have the effects as we see in terms of change in operations over half and the emergency response planning. And I think this last statistic, roughly an even split between those that have and don't have an emergency response plan, I think really establishes the subsequent pieces of our content, which ties everything that our panelists here share. And that's the fact that an organization's response or lack of a response has a direct impact in their ability to either withstand what's happening and or thrive once we come out of it. So the way that we've helped companies work through the immediate and soon-to-be future, so the immediate challenge and the soon-to-be future of what business looks like, is really a way to frame not only addressing the issues, but also compartmentalizing in terms of time frame. So if we go to the next slide, the way that we've been framing is really this almost perpetual cycle that businesses should be going through in most areas of their business on an ongoing basis, but it comes particularly crisp in a time such as the one we're facing now, in that we encourage our clients to really look at the body of how their business is running, analyze where the primary issues might be, and we'll get to some of the filtering that we encourage companies to consider, plan on how to address those issues, deploy these remediation tactics, execute the plans in a way to create a sustainable model based on how those changes can be. And this reevaluation cycle continues throughout the process of emerging from what's happening now to what the new normal has become. And the way to compartmentalize our clients is this notion of the calendar. Lori commented about some of her views relative to the time frame and what the priorities are. You'll see very much here. Now, time frame is really anything that's under 30 days. Most companies are in this zone right now. And that's are the things that maybe spending time on those things and when you're focused on survival, very soon your attention has to already shift. If you don't pay attention to, you'll break your business going down the road. And then the later would be anything that would take place outside of the 90-day window. And to go into a little more detail, one layer deep, if we go to the next slide, the way in which we look for the information, we try to find key things that permeate your entire organization. So first and foremost in this now time frame is the financial, right? So a heavy emphasis on cash preservation, deferring non-essential expenses, and really tying entire resilience planning to your financial model and subsistence of the company. If you have the ability in line already, do so for federal, state, local assistance. It'll take time to apply moving quickly, but as we like to say, drill the well before you're thirsty. Even if you don't come to need those lines of credit, you do owe it to your company to have them. Yeah. So first and foremost, financial. Second, inventory and logistics. Everything that ties into your supply chain shortfalls. How can you politically rebalance your firm in order to address which all means communicating with clients as to what to order that more in the system and either volumes or may not be able to.
Jeff, I hate to interrupt you, Jeff, but we are getting every other word from you. So I don't know if it's a location that you're in or a headset or what, but we're really having terrible audio for your section right now.
Is this proof?
We're getting sort of every other word.
Let me relocate. Can you give me a second?
Mm-hmm.
I may have to go outside. Forgive me about this. Sorry, can you hear me better now? Is this better?
Yes.
All right, very good. So in the interest of time, again, the theme that we see is this financial, inventory, and logistics, and then strategy planning and operations. This is where you would follow current state scenario and planning of what may happen next in terms of your production output, your staffing, anything that may be outsourced that may be difficult to encompass within your company at the moment. And then any data-driven decisions that without data, you might be hard-pressed to make the right decision for your business. Obviously, not losing sight of people and how to manage your workforce and keep people engaged, particularly under a remote model for perhaps many of the management and non-direct labor staff. And then lastly, this is a time for bad actors to increase their attention to causing harm. So cybersecurity and risks related to financial management are key. So this would be, in the time that we have, how we would encourage to encapsulate and filter the priorities on the now time frame. If we go to the next one, under the 60 days or less, same theme, financial. Right now, you're starting to go into regulatory compliance, so things related to tax filings. You cannot take the eye off of that ball, despite trying to keep the business in survival mode. Anything that may be addressed in terms of economic development and agency programs that may be able to fuel or sustain or help sustain your business. Relative to inventory and logistics, perhaps you haven't entirely gotten to the negotiation table with your vendors because you're just trying to make sure you get inventory. But this is now the time to really get into more of the details as to what does it mean to continue with that vendor relationship or possibly look elsewhere through strategic sourcing partnerships and redesigning or rebalancing your supply chain. From a strategy and planning and operations perspective, we have found that it's within that 60-day window that you begin to really have some energy to apply towards right-sizing the operation, perhaps reevaluating labor requirements in light of what your pipeline might look like. Anything that would be tied to your ERP are things that you may actually now have to have visibility that you didn't have before. We've encouraged companies to look at their supply chain many layers below the point where normally they would normally look. They might be dealing with a tier 1, but it might mean that if you're not understanding who the tier 2 or 3 is, that if they default on what your tier 1 needs, you may not have what you need as an integrator or as a final producer to add value and deliver your product. And then lastly, people still need to be engaged. We have a heavy emphasis on team engagement and effective communication, so make that a big piece of how you're managing the business from a strategy, planning, and operations perspective. And then lastly, in that next, those are the things that are happening, right, in the later piece. How you are addressing the overall manufacturing as it relates to nearshoring either your own operations or possibly of that of your suppliers. We have some turnkey resources through that website, returntomanufacturing.org, that should be helpful for you. They're freely available. New product development, perhaps this has put your company in a position to find an opportunity to answer market needs that maybe weren't necessarily on your radar screen before. Another opportunity is we've seen with clients that have been able to pivot and find both new markets and new channels for existing products, often in international markets. The ability to retrain the workforce and adopt new skills because there will be a change in how business gets conducted if you are a grower, a maker, or a mover of product, either in manufacturing and distribution. And lose no sight of the fact that one, capital planning and investment execution is materially changing. As Laurie put it, it's always important to have good fiscal rigor, but the way that many businesses are facing the current challenge, that only heightens, and it's something that is just healthy to keep in the long term. And then lastly, global trade management and trade compliance. If you think things were difficult before COVID-19 during the tariff spat across a number of countries, it's now going to be heightened. Rules of origin, understanding the supply base, making sure there are no risks is going to become an even greater emphasis by not just the U.S. government, but also other foreign governments. And then lastly, the audience that we like to leave with each of you as leaders of your organization is to think at a board level mindset, one where give people the tools that they need in your team, take care of them, work with your suppliers collaboratively, knowing that not all of them will be able to help, and it's on you as a leader to determine how do you backfill that with the right supplier capability. Thirdly, really aim to get that deep visibility into your supply chain, as I mentioned before. Go well beyond your tier 1 to know that if you have supply chain risks that if you don't get your hands into it, may not be properly addressed. Use this time as a means to find operational efficiencies that you didn't even know you had. And then lastly, it's the fact that you as a manufacturer, you're not alone. This is a difficult time. This is facing everybody at both a business, individual, and civilization level. And that we encourage you to, as you're trying to work through this, really do look outside. Those of us on the line here are here to help. Reach out, count on us to transition your current circumstances from survival to a sustainable recovery. Laurie?
Great, thank you, Jeff. We will have some questions for Jeff as well, but before we do that, I want to go to Alex. Alex, you're a consultant from a major consulting firm that has been servicing the PMA members for a very long time and many other North American manufacturers. So I'm curious just if you could kind of share with us what you're seeing in the market today as you talk to your customers, and what are some of your biggest concerns that you're hearing from them and as you chat with them over the last several weeks?
Yep. So just to fill everyone in, my typical client is a $50 to $250 million manufacturing company. Going to be metal fabricators, capital equipment manufacturers, automotive, a lot of things in that arena. What we're seeing for the most part is that many of our clients have successfully transitioned their office staff home and are only keeping their shop floors open for essential activities. So that is only keeping the part of their business open that serves an essential need. Keep in mind, most of our clients are in Michigan, and we're currently under a stay-at-home order. But the concerns we are seeing are really around what's going to happen when we go back. How do manufacturing facilities hit the ground running once things start back up while staying safe? There's a really long list of factors. Things as simple as, how's my break room going to limit person-to-person contact? Do we have the appropriate PPE? Is my stay-home sick policy putting my workforce at risk? We're really recommending that our clients do a complete flow of your operations, both in the office and the shop floor, to get a full understanding of all the areas that could be affected once things start ramping back up. These are all considerations that need to have a plan, and then also you can get your workforce to start working on executing that plan once it is developed.
Okay. So, Alex, you guys do a lot in the supply chain side of the business in your consulting group. So can you share a little bit of some of the kind of primary activities that these guys in the stamping metal fabricating community should be thinking about as they ramp back up, particularly with their supply chain, but also with their operations team? What should they be working on?
Yeah, sure. So the first step is really stabilizing, right? It's important to develop and execute contingency plans for all operational disruptions. These should be things like determining which areas of your business are essential and scaling back appropriately, shifting production from COVID-affected facilities where possible, assessing and solving impacts to your supply chain. And then on the looking forward side, evaluate and prioritize engineering requirements for products, and especially products that could be for new customers in areas that you could help the country fight this pandemic.
Okay. And in terms of that communication plan, in terms of, hey, we're going to be starting up in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, what are some of the key steps to creating that communication plan? What do you think is most critical for these shops to be thinking about?
Yeah, so I think the first step is identification of a COVID-19 crisis communication leader. This should be somebody who's experienced, who's managed crisis situations before and isn't easily thrown off their game. That person should build out a crisis response team. This should be a cross-functional team that's going to be able to address all the aspects of the business and represent really the different aspects of the business when we're talking about this common subject. A level below that should be a senior level team, and I understand some of your organizations may be smaller, so all these steps aren't completely critical, but have a communication plan and talk to your management team about what they should be talking to their employees about. Creating a coordinated plan is the third step here. So be ready to adapt it. New information is getting released every single day, so this team needs to meet regularly and keep up with anything that's changing and update the plan accordingly, so that you can step forward, communicate everything that's going on early and often, so that your team is not uncertain. Uncertainty can be a huge productivity killer and morale killer for an organization, so it's important to communicate effectively. And lastly, keep promises. Don't make statements that might become untrue or commitments that can't be kept. It's important to be optimistic, but obviously you don't want to be spreading rumors or things like that either. So hopefully that helps out. Yeah,
no, that's great. And then just one last question for you, and then we'll move to some of the other live questions that we have. What are some of the ideas on this? We're all in this remote meeting space now, right? So any ideas or thoughts about how to make that more effective and productive?
Yeah, and I think the real answer is it depends on the type of meeting that you're having. If it's supposed to be a very interactive meeting, I think it goes without saying that you try to use video where possible, so that you can see people's reactions, read body language, and no one's interpreting things just through voice. From a presentation standpoint, One of the cool things that I've heard people on my team doing is actually have nobody on video as you are presenting, and then if it's a small enough group, have people turn on their video as they have discussed or have questions, so they're not interrupting the flow of a presentation to somebody on your team or a team meeting or something like that, but the presenter is able to see that there is a question and they can address it when needed.
Okay. I want to jump back to Omar. As you can imagine, Omar, there's quite a few questions here for you, and I think you have some thoughts or some things that you could maybe share to one of our earlier questions about the CDC and if you have an infected person in your plant. Can you just give some thoughts on what the CDC is recommending about that if you have a production worker?
Sure, thanks, Lori. The CDC has been constantly updating its guidances. The most recent one that they issued, I believe, either last Wednesday or Thursday, and they look at a couple of the spaces, and in terms of what they want, typically they want you to wait 24 hours or as long as practical before beginning cleaning and disinfection. So that's essentially for any kind of facility where they do not house people overnight. That's how they classify it there. So the initial 24-hour cooling period, so to speak, is what they want before you start going in, and then use the other guidance that they've given you about gloves and other PPE for when cleaning, or the professional cleaners that come in will be aware. And then they do also look at, in cases, in some types of establishments, they are looking at if it has been more than 7 days since the person with suspected confirmed COVID-19 visited or used the facility, additional cleaning and disinfection is not necessary. So they're also looking at it, since if you find out that the individual maybe has already been home for several days, you start the clock 7 days from when that individual last used or visited that space that's out there. So those are just a couple of the updates to the initial guidance. But again, cdc.gov, that's where you should be going. They've got a couple links specifically that'll say for businesses and employers, and they'll always have the latest. They're updating, looks like, about every 7 to 10 days.
Okay. Omar, another question about the just the stay-at-home orders. The question from the group is, do you expect the federal government and actually the president to issue some kind of a nationwide closure and remove the state control?
At this point, sources in the White House do not indicate that is likely something that the president would like to do. Most likely, the president at this point keeps looking and pointing to the governors and the local counties and municipalities, to my earliest point on essential businesses. So no, at this point, we're not hearing rumors of it. And especially now that the governors on their own have effectively done stay-at-home orders to varying degrees, with the exception of roughly 8 governors, I think that he doesn't necessarily feel like he has to do that anymore.
Okay, makes sense. Another one as it relates to the loans, and then we'll move back to some of the stampers for some questions. In this period where companies are declining in their payroll, in this particular case, this person's qualified for a larger PPP loan, and it's probably going to be more than they actually likely need. Most of it will still be payroll, but can a portion of the amount be forgiven related to the amount of payroll while any excess gets set up as a loan portion?
So you've already done the right thing in that you do want to actually apply and get the maximum amount possible. And the reason we state that is because it's a first come, first served basis. So it is important to identify that. On the loan forgiveness, where they do a couple of caps here for guardrails, you may have, as long as you don't reduce the payroll and you don't bring them, and you're not able to bring them back after June 30th, you can have most or all of the loan forgiven. What they're doing on the forgiveness part, at least 75% of the loan's purposes, or the loan must be used for payroll purposes. So you have to pay the staff, and to cover the term of payroll costs has to be at least 75%. The rest, meaning mortgage interest, utility, and rent, those cannot exceed 25%. So regardless of the amount of loan that you've got, you want to keep that 75-25 ratio. Otherwise, that's where the trigger comes in on losing the loan forgiveness for the first 8 weeks, assuming you've maintained payroll between the point of the loan and then the June 30th timeframe. So you've obviously got to repay portions of the loan beyond those that aren't forgiven if they are again exceeding that 75-25 threshold.
Okay. This question, I think I'm going to ask Jeff and Alex. Maybe you can chime in afterwards. One of the participants is an OEM supplier of capital equipment, and they're, of course, going and talking to their customers and hearing no capital expenditures for the next 90 days. So how do you, any thought or insight for some of these guys as they look to continue to maintain their business and grow in the future?
Yeah, no, that's a good
Jeff,
question. And we've been hearing, yes, thanks, Lori. Thanks for that question. We've been hearing that from others in similar circumstances too on the CapEx layer of the market. And what we encourage our clients to do, and they're seeing results with this, is stay close to the client to understand what is driving their decision. If it is driven by their business slowing down and therefore those operational and CapEx investments being delayed, and whether they are or they aren't, it's important that your client knows that you have likely demand that's going to spike once things begin to normalize in terms of demand, and that protecting your capacity to produce for them is key. So having that, not that you're putting them on notice that, look, if you don't lock in your capacity with me now, I may not be able to help you, but it just makes you further integrated into what your client is doing and their strategic decision making that affects investing in your business to produce capital equipment for them. So we've seen our clients improve, how that maybe 90-day window might have been shortened to less, but that's one of the things that we've seen work out the best at this point.
Alex, any other thoughts about that?
Yeah, I would just say, that's really good advice, Jeff. And I would just say be ready to hit the ground running. So when you do hear from the client that the work is coming back and they are going to accept it, that you're not the reason that there's any more delays, that you're ready to hit the ground running and your workforce is ready to go.
This might be an opportunity just to complement that thought, and thank you, Alex, for that. This might be an opportunity to discuss terms. Not that this is an opportunity to crowbar open a previously negotiated agreement, but this might be an opportunity to extend different terms to how they can lock you in for that future supply in less than a 90-day period, where you may be able to see perhaps some different advancement of capital if it's milestone-based payments for the equipment you guys produce. That could be another point of discussion with them to keep you close and tight to what they're doing.
This is a question for Hale. Hale, one of your peers is asking, they also have a water jet and are wondering if you're willing to share the door hook that you created to open doors safely.
Absolutely. I'll send me an email. My email is on our website, Scandic.com, and I'll send you the DXF.
I'll just add, this is Gretchen, that we don't have a water jet, but we used our 3D printer and made them out of plastic for all of our employees after Hale shared the codes with us.
Cool. Yeah, anybody who would like to have the program, just shoot me an email.
Yep, others are asking for it as well. So I'm sure that PMA will make sure that contact information is shared. Just a reminder, we have a little bit of time left, so if you have additional questions, please type them into your question panel there. Omar, I have one for you while we're waiting for others to come in. As you know, the PPP program is there to sort of ensure the payroll and keeping people employed, and so that companies can bridge that gap until production starts again. If we fast forward 6 months and these loans have been forgiven for the most part, and manufacturing begins to come back, but at a lower demand level, just because of a reduction in consumer spending or lack of car sales, or whatever the case is, do those employers then have the ability to lay off people and right size their workforce once it's been forgiven, or is this part of the loan program?
So a week ago, we were looking at a stimulus bill being the phase four. I lobbied very actively in '08 and 2009, and I remember cash for clunkers very, very well. And believe it or not, the auto industry and dealers are walking around the hill right now, walking, but they're sending email up to the hill right now, trying to bring in the cash for clunkers program again. And right now, I don't think we're ready for the economic stimulus portion of this. That's not what we're hearing from our sources on the Hill or White House. They're in what we call economic stabilization mode. And so we're probably looking at round four here being still more on the stabilization, replenishing in addition to the PPP, providing additional support directly to American individuals and then across the board. I think it's phase five that you're going to be looking at the stimulus. At least that's the hope, assuming that things start to level off here eventually. So phase four, we think, is going to be another support, economic support stabilization measure. And when we get into the stimulus type, which I'm hearing would likely come in mid to late June or early July, that's where we're going to probably see some additional incentives. The one area where they did right now in phase three address that is the interest deduction limitation was lifted under the TCJA EBITDA from 30% to 50%. So that should help there a little bit in the interim, but no, I don't think you're going to see another big massive stimulus type to urge the purchasing, the buying, and the manufacturing until the summertime on phase five. At this point, phase four is again looking like it's more of a support measure.
But so the SBA loan, does it restrict them from laying people off in the future?
There are two. The SBA loan states that if you want to have it fully forgiven, then you must maintain, typically they're looking for around 90%, but they want you to maintain the same amount of payroll on the close date of June 30 that you had back on the initial estimate date that you put on your form. So again, yeah, they're not, the PPP, to that, I think, further point, they're not allowing this use for capital equipment. They're just trying to keep people on payroll at this point. And the next round, I could see over the summer maybe addressing more on the stimulus point.
Okay. So one question about, we'll ask this of Gretchen. Actually, I'm not sure who it was that mentioned masks. Someone did, but besides the self-made masks, are there other industrial supplies available for critical manufacturing workers? I'm not sure who mentioned the masks, but whoever did maybe could answer that.
I think that Gretchen said that they were homemade masks internally. We were lucky enough to be way ahead of the curve and bought plenty last month.
Okay. Are you guys able to find other industrials now, or are they hard to find at this point?
Very hard.
We haven't had any problems here in California.
So we use them in our plating department when we clean plating tanks. So we had a supply of the N95s, and those are currently locked up so that employees don't try to take them, because I think we may have to give them to our local hospital. We're actually telling people, go ahead and make your own. We can't buy the other ones.
Yeah. Okay. Alex, a question for you as you look at the market, other than the medical device market, which is obviously still busy, or anything in medical, what area of manufacturing do you think is going to come out on the other side the strongest?
That's a good question. I don't know if I can answer that specifically, but I can say that, if we can keep the economy supported while we get through these peaks, we are really expecting everything to shift back, as quickly as it can, as quickly as we are able to get back to normal. We're going to be taking those measures, if not, plus. And I say that from as soon as people can start going out and buying new TVs, that's going to happen. So I would say that I just think everyone needs to be ready for the economy to come back in force. And that's what we've been telling our clients is we're in a lull right now. It's really about making sure you're ready for the huge wave that's coming once all these restrictions go away.
Laurie, this is Jeff. If I can share a quick comment, we've been keeping track of what the economic indicators look like as COVID-19 continues to move through our society and our economy. And there have been a variety of scenarios in terms of decline and recovery, some of which we have already seen are no longer plausible. You know, this idea of a sharp decline and a sharp resurgence of the economy, what is being called the V curve, that's looking less and less likely because of what we're seeing in terms of the unemployment and the access to capital through government sources. What we are seeing data begin to point to is that the recovery, if it is going to be in the near term into 2021, is one that is either going to be an L type of impact where we've had a sharp decline as we see it, but the increase will be fairly moderate, almost like an asymptotic curve, so L-shaped. The other is one that's still looking plausible, and that is a U-shaped curve where we see a fairly big drop off that stabilizes and then gradually comes back up again. So our data continues to track that. If you, again, just get in touch with us, we have the means to publish that information, make it available to you. But as all of us, we want this to come back as quickly as possible.
There's a question here, actually, that I think I might take. Someone mentioned reshoring and trade wars and the pandemic. And question is, do you think there will be a resurgence of local manufacturing sourcing to mitigate the risk in the future? Or does this customer focus on price first, hence will continue to source to LCC countries? We've been doing a lot of studying about this in the Chinese market and the US market here. And I think that as it relates to production parts, we're actually hearing from some tier ones and OEMs and the people we've spoken to that there is some look to reshore or at least dual source some of these parts in local regions in order to avoid this. But there's also a real strong belief that this is a one-time thing, whether we all agree with that or not, but a one-time thing that may go away. Frankly, on the tool side of the business, as you know, the Chinese market has begun launching their manufacturing, and the tool suppliers are up to about 90% of capacity. And so we're actually seeing tool suppliers come back kind of with a vengeance. They need to rebuild their economy. You know, the Chinese GDP dropped to 2% in the month of February. So their government will be actively working, and all of these parts, stamping, plastics, tooling, are all part of the China 2025 plan. So we suspect that the government will work diligently to support pricing. And frankly, I think the OEMs are going to need pricing support because they're going to have a major hit to their profitability. So I unfortunately don't know that we're going to see a major resurgence in the coming months or year or two. One question for you, Omar. One of the shops has said last year they had a lot of overtime, and this year they obviously won't have that. So how does that affect the forgiveness portion of the PPP loan?
And again, a lot of these you really do have to go to your lender. I'm seeing different lenders put different requirements, even some that aren't even in the law. So we've got some more direction last night from the IRS or Treasury rather. So I would start with asking your lender, but I think that's similar to the previous question. I think you still just need to apply the ratio of forgiveness. And so recognizing that that part of the loan, if it does have to be repaid and you don't want it to necessarily jeopardize your 75-25 ratio, you can use that other excess part of the loan for your, again, qualifying reasons, which are mortgage interest, rent, utilities, outside of the payroll side. So again, check with your lender, but our understanding is, again, the loan part forgiven. Anything, you'll just have to keep thinking of it as if it's a payroll cost, meaning it goes towards their salary, wages, commission, and the other things that are defined in that definition, then that is the part that you want to focus on, making sure that's 75% or higher to keep your forgiven ratio where you want it to be. So again, it's one of the 25%. If you start breaking that, then that part isn't forgiven. So you just want to try to keep that ratio and focus on the payroll side. If you have excess, you still use that money for qualifying reasons. Again, the mortgage interest, the utilities, the rent, but you still can't use it for anything beyond that. But I would double check with your banker because that's at least what we've been understanding from here in Washington.
Alex, I'll direct this question to you because you've made a couple comments about the economy and sort of being prepared for it to return. The question is, with businesses possibly closing, in other words, they can't make it out of this, and higher unemployment rates, do we really think the economy will spike up that significantly?
I didn't mean to insinuate that it was going to be a spike back up. I just, we're planning on things coming back, and this not being a super long-term ordeal. Now, whether we're going to get back to normal volumes quickly or not, I don't want to comment on that. It's really around being, staying informed and understanding when your customers are going to start needing things again and being ready to deliver when that happens. So it's really staying in touch and keeping your customers' interests very aligned with yours.
Okay. Gretchen and Hale, I'll direct this question to you. I know you've both talked about you've got some adequate space within your facility, but you're both part of PMA groups, and maybe some other of your peers have shared this with you, but one of the PMA members is asking for some guidance around small space shops where they're sharing workbenches and milling machines and lathes and things of that nature. And they're limiting staff today to 2 or 3 people so they can maintain cleaning protocols. But how might they think about, evaluating that moving forward as things start to, when they need to bring more people back? Have you gotten any insight from your peer group on that? Gretchen, maybe you could start.
Well, I didn't get any insights from our peer group, but initially in New York, they talked about us needing to have at least 50% of our workforce not at the facility at any one time. So we were trying to figure out how we could stagger our shifts to work with one department at one time and another department at another time, and even going through the weekends with different days so that we got in our work, but we didn't have everybody in the building at the same time. So that might help.
Yes, same here in California. Yeah. We are working on encouraging people to distance themselves time-wise. Frankly, we've not had a lot of success with that so far. There are commute issues and childcare issues and working spouse issues, and I'm trying to be sympathetic to that. But if this goes for another month, and it might, we will probably have to enforce that rather than ask people to do it.
Yeah, I have a couple clients who run 20-man shops on one shift doing tooling type things, and they've actually implemented a 3-shift program, and they've asked their staff to spread out across 3 shifts, only temporarily, but to be able to manage the social distancing and keep working and keep building the essential products. That's the best example that I have at this point anyways.
Yeah, I think that the longer this goes on, the more people realize that these are not usual times and our usual habits about when to come to work and when to go home. We just have to throw that out the window. So I think that at least out here, people are getting to that point.
This is an interesting question. I'll start with you, Omar, because I think on the phone you're probably one of the ones who travel more than anybody in this group, and maybe Alex and Jeff as well. The question is, when this is all over, do we think that companies will go back to traveling as normal, or the significant increase from work might be here to stay? Do we think, travel will resume?
Yeah, I think that you look back at what happened after 2008 and 2009, there wasn't business as usual, and people did change the way that they looked at essential expenses, essential travel, and so on. As yes, somebody who was happy to get an email from United saying I'm keeping my 1K status throughout next year, yeah, I was definitely happy to keep it. But I do think you're going to see a change because, in large part, folks, yes, you'll have some fear of travel. I'm hearing Airbnb is going to really struggle as people would rather have the sanitary areas of a hotel rather. But I do think that more people are going to realize they can accomplish quite a bit remotely, and that will in turn, one, possibly lead to more efficiency, but then also could definitely hurt some other economies and areas that do support those kinds of travel industries, the leisure, not leisure, but the conferences. I'm thinking of my 5 trade associations that that we deal with right now. So from that standpoint, yes, we definitely are going to expect to see some kind of change in travel habits and also the way people meet and organize.
Laurie, this is Jeff here, and I agree with Omar in that there's going to be a change. What I would offer as one having a dubious status on Delta or away from my family, that with all the travel I've done and what I see happening is that probably the normalization of travel as we once had, if it does get to that prior level, will really come when there's an inoculation developed, right? When there's a vaccine, people then go and get on planes and go to places that maybe right now they wouldn't. We've seen that, as I have operated and launched facilities in Latin America and Europe and pockets of Asia. You go to a place that normally wouldn't have malaria like the US, but in your destination there is, you take the medication and take the vaccination and off you go. So I think we will get to a point that that's going to be normal again as far as travel to some degree, but I think it'll be tied to a vaccination.
We have right now just one last question. We only have a couple minutes left, and Omar, it's probably here for you. It's are foreign-owned U.S. subsidiaries eligible for SBA loans, paycheck loans?
So this is one of the two final issues that we're final, but two of the top issues of which we've been trying to get a definitive answer. I think we've got a little bit more clear on what we call the affiliation rule that deals with private equity and venture capitalist firms just last week. Now the way that the law currently reads for the PPP, at least you take it literally, you can't use the loan to pay an employee whose residence is not in the United States. And so that tends to disqualify a number of entities where they have gotten you. We talked to one PMA member yesterday, and they indicated since they are foreign owned, what the bank did is they used their affiliation rule. They judged that they were affiliated with that foreign entity, and the foreign entities affiliated combined businesses exceeded the 500 employee threshold. So if you are under 500 with all the affiliated, it is unclear, but they're leaning likely against allowing the foreign owned. If you are over 500 with all the affiliated, then yes, they will not grant you a loan because just on that matter, forget the foreign ownership, they're simply just relying on the size limit based on affiliation. We have not fully gotten clear on foreign owned. It is definitely clear that 500 or more are not permitted to participate in the separate $500 billion program if they're foreign owned. So mid and large companies were explicitly stated as foreign owned not participate. With regards to the PPP, they only said loans cannot be used to pay for payroll for a person not in the United States. So that's where it's only been clear. So we would check first the affiliation and see if the overseas entity combined totals more than 500 workers, and that would automatically disqualify.
Okay. Before I turn it back over to Brad, I just, as moderator, would like to just thank everyone for participating. I think for me, we had a record number of people on the webinar today, so hopefully this was helpful for you. I also would encourage you, as I think Jeff said earlier, you've got, experts on the phone here from myself, Jeff and Alex. All three of us are in consulting, working with a lot of stampers and other manufacturers, and of course, Omar, and then your peers. Please don't hesitate to reach out. I mean, this is not a time for, pride, quite frankly. It's a time to get help if you don't have an answer. And I think by evidence, by all of you being on the phone today, you're looking for as many pieces of information as you can get. So again, I thank you for participating. I turn it back over to Brad from the PMA to close us out.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Lori. And again, thank you everybody for attending, for joining us today. I think it was an excellent conversation that Lori led. So thanks to Lori for her moderation, to Omar, Gretchen, Hale, Jeff, and Alex as well for their input. Everybody's crazy busy these days, a lot on their plates, so we really appreciate everybody's participation. As I said at the beginning, we did record this webinar. We'll have it up on our website either this afternoon or tomorrow morning. We'll send you an email with a link to that. And if you have any questions, my email is there. Hale reminded me to let everybody know that he is willing to share the program that he used to cut that no-touch door opener on his water jet. So you can email him at hfoote, spelled as you see it there, F-O-O-T-E, hfoote at Scandic.com. onevoice.com. So thank you very much, Hale. And Omar, do you want to remind everybody what the website is for up-to-date information that PMA and Franklin Partnership are gathering on a regular basis, that people should be visiting those websites regularly?
Thank you. Onevoiceinfo.org, onevoiceinfo.org. That's got the resources, state, local, everything from CDC to the latest on PPP and tax forms that you need to fill out. Onevoiceinfo.org.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. Thanks, everybody, for attending. Be safe. And you can close your browsers now and enjoy the rest of your days. Thank you. Bye-bye.